Okay, so back in February there was a release of Visual Studio 2015, a preview that had Docker integration. So basically you can sit there in Visual Studio and run your app in Docker. So how many people have used Docker here? So how many people are familiar with .NET Core? Okay, so quite a lot of people. Okay, great. So obviously virtual machines versus containers, just you're only deploying the application, not in a virtual machine. It's much lighter, much faster startup, and you're kind of deploying an environment versus deploying a whole machine. And that makes sense in the new world of microservices, because each little container may have a service that depends on other services, and it's an easy deployment. And it means that you can possibly go straight from dev to production if you're game enough, because you can just take your container and build it on your dev machine and deploy it across many environments. With Docker, it's a bit like source code control. So there's a base image, and in each change that's made to that image is a layer. And when you run that that application, all those layers are merged together, and you're running an application. And the way they set up Visual Studio is it does that very much. So it's a edit and run sort of scenario without a large amount of time to compile. So the setting up Visual Studio 2015 is a preview version. You need to obviously download and install the preview. You need to install .NET Core, and you need to install the Docker Toolbox. So in the past 2 weeks there's now been the Docker for Windows beta been released, so you can use that as well, alternatively. .NET Core is obviously needed because if you're deploying into a Linux environment, it's a Linux container, so the .NET Core needs to run in Linux or Macintosh or Windows, and so that's what you're getting here. And it's quite neat, I think, that you can do this. And what is .NET Core? Well, I think they used to call it .NET 5, right? And then people thought that 5 is greater than 4.5, and it's not actually. There's a lot of stuff that isn't in .NET Core. You go searching for namespaces and things, and it's not there. And it's a little bit, you're not in Kansas anymore. There's a JSON config file format, etc. It's open source, and it runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it's obviously needed for this sort of demo. So, who has seen Docker in Visual Studio? Anyone? Okay. All right. So what you do is you have this stuff, and you have your normal Visual Studio project. This is an ASP.NET 5 core ASP.NET Core 1.0 project, and you can run it obviously as you normally do, debug, etc. And what you do is you come over to the project, and you say add Docker support, and that brings in the Docker support, which is the script files. So these things: docker.props, Docker targets, and the Docker YAML files, and the Docker files for debug and release, and then a PowerShell script to run it and make it happen on your machine or on a different machine if you want. So it's, I guess, being in Visual Studio, they kind of dumb it down, so you don't have to go and get into all the plumbing of Visual Studio of Docker, and it gives you, as a .NET program, it gives you a starting point to get into Docker, because now you can go, look in one of these files and start to play around, and you've got kind of you're moving from a known place into the unknown, which is a lot easier than just taking a big jump leap into the unknown. Now the way this works is that obviously you run this as an iOS experience, we all know that, but now you have a Docker runtime, and we can just run it. Kicks off the PowerShell script using those Docker files, and it takes a little time to run up. So I think that they're taking an iterative approach to this. This is obviously a little bit clunky, a little bit slow. There's something going on between the Docker container and the website and the web browser, right? It's watching to see.
It's opening the Hyper-V ports and doing the NAT stuff.
Yeah. But it's actually the Oracle VirtualBox.
Oh, you're using VirtualBox?
In the release candidate, the first release candidate, you've got to use the Oracle VirtualBox. The one they released 2 weeks ago, you can use Hyper-V, which I did install. I had a bit of trouble with, and I went back to the original, to the first. It's always good playing with this previous stuff. You tend to. It's always a familiar pattern. You know, you take little steps ahead and make sure you don't get too far ahead of yourself. So eventually we see a web browser come up with the site. There we go. So it's running a Linux container, and bang, there we are. Who can tell the difference? Well,
it says Linux.
So yeah, so the idea is that so you're in this brave new world where you can run in Macintosh or Linux or Windows. So all the kind of config files that you're used to, it's not really going to work anymore. So you have the behavior, which is the application. You have the location, which is development, test, or production. So what they're saying is you use environment variables to bring in that location data. So let's just go into the C# here and look at some environment variables. So this mode here, I mean, I've got two sets of code. This is kind of the Windows way of doing things. And I'll just go back to IIS Express so we see that work.
Can you zoom a bit, please? Can you zoom
Font
a bit,
size.
please?
Zoom? How do I zoom?
Control scroll wheel.
Control
Or
scroll.
hit the zoom thing down the bottom left. That way, that
Thank you.
So this is kind of the Windows way of doing it. But when you first go in here, you start trying to plumb around trying to get the host name, and the old namespaces aren't there anymore. The old way of doing things. So we just go and get environment variables to see that works. So now this is back in Windows. We run it. IIS Express. Probably due for a new machine this year, this tax year. So go to the About. And I think I've got a break. I'll just take that off for a moment. And it's got the host name from the environment variable. We've got the OS as Windows NT, which is what the environment says it is. So that's how you're getting that. But if we go into Linux, as we saw, into the container as we saw, it was blank. So there's a whole different set of environment variables. They're all different names. And I'll just uncomment this. So what we've got is we're going out and getting the environment variable, the host name, which is the way Linux does it, and we're getting the OS, which is yeah. Look, I actually couldn't find the environment variable for so I just got this one. Because I'm just getting into Linux. I've used it as an environment for other languages, but Linux itself I don't know much about. So let's just go back to Docker and then run that. So when people are using Docker, are they writing a lot of scripts and things at work? Is that the idea? Is that how you're making it work? Yeah.
Say again?
When people are using Docker at work, are they writing a lot of scripts? You're not using the Windows applications, is that right?
Mainly for services and things that can be easily transported. So say if you've got the service running with Nancy that's cross-platform,
Yeah.
then you've got the option to host that on Linux, whereas a lot of stuff is pinned either by dependencies or folder path separators or legacy code. You generally rewrite something small, put it out there. I want to see the M word.
I don't understand what you're talking about. The other thing with Docker is that with Windows Server 2016, the Docker commands will work with the Windows containers.
Yep.
So you can, if you were targeting 2016 and things like that, you could build full normal .NET type stuff deployed as Docker using the same Docker toolkit. You wouldn't be able to run it locally on your own machine. You'd have to run it against, like you have to be doing the dev on a Windows Server box.
Yeah.
But nothing stops you doing that.
Yeah, there's a config file here where you can actually add the server name where we deploy it to.
Yeah, you'd have to change the Docker file in terms of the base image that it builds from. So that the default Docker file it generates builds off a Linux base image,
Yep.
obviously. But switching that to a Windows Server core or something like that wouldn't be too much drama.
So we go to About now, and the environment variables coming from Linux. So we've got the host name and the Ubuntu.
What is the first time it's empty?
Because I ran it in Windows with the Linux environment variables. I should have had it commented out. So. Okay, so now the idea of so we've got two different sets of ways of doing environment variables. We want to have one paradigm for environment variables, and that is catered for by the YAML files. So these YAML files are in Docker. They define the services and the resources that you have, whereas the Docker files actually do the build of the image. So what we have here is an environment section in the file, and that's in the YAML documentation. This is described, and I've defined an environment variable hosting.environment equals development. And let's go to, so we're in the debug environment, which is going to use this debug file. That's docker-compose.debug. So let's go back to my code and just uncomment that part. So what I'm doing here is getting that environment here, that environment variable. So I'm getting that into view data. So let's run that. So the idea of placing location data into environment variables is fine for things that aren't so secret. Once there's secrets in your environment variables, people can inspect the Docker images and see those secrets. So the next kind of iteration of this is in .NET Core there's a secrets module, secrets facility, where you'll be getting your passwords and connection strings from there. And I'm not able to demo that because it's I just didn't get to that, but that would be nice to see, huh?
I feel like we need the cookie shell approach here. Use my hyper a bit earlier.
So is there any way that you can show that behind the scene as verbals? So instead of just dot and wait forever?
I guess you could change alter the PowerShell script. The PowerShell script that's running is this one. So you could change the options in there if you wanted to. So if you're going to try this, obviously you need to have the Docker running. That's a mistake for the young players. It wasn't running first when I tried it. It didn't work. And here we go. So go to the About box, and there's our environment variable coming through. And if we go to sorry, I've got a release. One. If you run that, you see
Can we
release.
try maybe put some breakpoint and then?
Remote debug.
Yep.
Yes. So let's put a breakpoint.
You don't need breakpoints. You've got a good unit test, right?
So I'll put a breakpoint. I did spend a fair amount of time on trying to get this working. Now, The breakpoints for the last 2 weeks, it should be working in the second version of the RC2. But whenever I download the RC2, I just get the first version of the RC2, so the breakpoints aren't working. But in the video demo they have on the internet, the breakpoint works. But in this one, it doesn't work.
So does it work for all the project type or just a web app?
Just C#, just ASP.NET Core at the moment.
Okay. So like console app will not work.
Should do.
I should do, yeah.
Simple concept.
Yeah. It's just an exe that's getting deployed. So the main thing is that if you bring the Docker file up for a second, while that's waiting,
Which one? The Docker.
do release, it's easier. You don't have all the other stuff in there. Scroll down a little bit. You'll see there it's basically just doing the entry point, DNX project JSON. In RC2 that says .NET, and then it just runs an exe, which, because in RC2 ASP.NET is basically just an exe now. So self-contained, all that sort of thing. So a console app that's an exe will run just as well. The issue will be what you're exposing in terms of port numbers and how you want to access things in the container. So,
Okay, so the breakpoint didn't work, and that's because I don't have the right version of the release candidate 2, and I just can't find it.
When you talk about VS 2015, you talk about VS 50, or is this?
Visual Studio 2015.
2015.
Yeah, preview.
No, 2015.
already have it?
The preview is the Docker tools.
Oh, right, so it's a standard 2015.
Standard 2015 with the preview of the Docker tools in there.
So has this been integrated into 50 as well?
Yeah. I think it's an add-in for 15 as well. It's not integrated. At least, well, 15's not built yet, so who knows what will be there.
Preview zone.
Yeah, it's a
So,
preview.
so when you set this up, you have to. It's not Visual Studio 2015. It's a special version of Visual Studio.
No.
Yeah, I think it is. Okay. We'll see. Yeah. So there we go. So the environment variables in those files, and implications for the development workflow. So you're building on the development machine. You can send that straight to another machine. You don't need to rebuild in other environments. Obviously, there are people here who are more conservative than that and need to have their checks paid by people. But build on a dev machine, check it in, then build in a test machine, and then that image is then deployed to all other environments. The behavior is differentiated by environment variables. As we mentioned, this is the snippet of the configuration. You just put your name of your VM in there, and it sends it to wherever that Docker machine is running. So having your secrets in environment variables is not desirable. So there's this ASP.NET Core Secret Manager, which is a module that you're meant to store your secrets in. Currently, the idea is preventing your secrets from being checked into your source code control. You can associate your secrets with a project or share across projects. You specify user secrets ID in your project.json, and project.json is the new configuration file format in .NET Core. And you get it with accessing a configuration variable. And it works currently, it's in a JSON file in Windows and Linux and Mac in those locations. But that's just for your information, that you don't depend on that, because eventually that will go away and be something really secret. Okay, so that's what I've got.
Cool. Questions, guys?
Yep.
Oh, over there.
This might be Docker related, but when you set up Docker, did you have to install the base image yourself, or does it automatically pull down?
It's the first time you do this, you'll sit there and it pulls down a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay, so it does pull the base image for you.
Yeah, yeah. So
that's part of Docker files. When Docker does a build, if the image isn't in your local images repository, it will actually pull it down for you.
And
Yeah,
this
so-
needs to be done all before you start.
Yeah, yeah. So there's this, you get the Docker tools from Docker, And the first time you start this quick start terminal, it does a lot of that sort of stuff and brings it down. And it takes quite a while, and you see a whole.
Do you want to bring the Docker images up?
Is that the same in the reverse?
Just-
if you make changes to the Docker image, it will push it back up to Docker Hub for you?
You don't make changes to images.
Oh, to
You add
So
layers.
the way Docker works, images are immutable. So if you were the provider of the image and you built a new image, then you could push that and then replace basically, or new version it. But it'll have a different hash code on it and all that sort of thing because it's obviously a different build. So yeah, if you were you want to do pushing to the hub as part of a CD process, you could do that.
So does this only work for .NET Core?
So again?
So will this only work for .NET Core? It won't work
Yeah,
for-
well, at the moment, so with Windows containers, presumably you could do it with other .NETs.
So obviously,
Can
when
you bring the
Windows do it
Docker
for
file
previous-
up again?
Yeah.
Should work with Node and
What was that one?
should work with Node. Node tools.
What's Node?
It's JavaScript really.
What's JavaScript?
It's this it's fake Java.
Oh, right. With scripts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and PHP. That's a different base. Yeah. Okay. So this is your base image here. It's a bit hard. Can you read that? Yeah. So basically, this is Microsoft providing it. That's the name of the image, and then after the colon is a tag. So you're basically building off that tagged image. In this case, the ASP.NET one there already has under it a thing called Jesse, I think, is the image or something. Depending on that, you can look at it on Docker Hub and see their build file. And these are the steps they go through. So if you were doing a Windows one, instead of using the .NET Core, here you'd probably have a Windows Server Core image with maybe something built with the full .NET runtime on it already as the base image that you have, and then you take your bits, copy it in, set your working directories, and then set your start point wherever it was down here, so that when it starts up, it then runs your application on top of that .NET Windows Server image.
So what's Docker Hub then? Is that like a package?
It's a NuGet repository for a type thing.
For images?
Yeah.
And that's free, is it?
Yeah.
How does Docker make money? Is it all open?
How does Docker make money? So they're open source. I don't know. How does anyone make money on the internet these
They have
days?
an enterprise.
Yeah, yeah, they've got some commercial stuff and there's support and all that sort of thing. It's the classic open source with support model. You can bring the hub up if you want.
I'm not actually that literate with.
Oh, have you got an internet connection at the moment?
No, I don't.
All right, let's not do that.
So you're saying earlier on that you use Oracle box, is it?
Oracle VirtualBox it's called,
Yeah,
right?
the
Yeah.
point.
So you have to disable Hyper-V to get this running.
I think
But
you
with the-
paused the recording.
Yes, okay. But with the latest release, the last 2 weeks, it works with Hyper-V. So then you get rid of Oracle Box.
Is that faster?
I don't know, just it's the same, it's just
So-
different.
Yeah, it's a bit different.
This is native.
The way, yeah, it's the beta of the, so Docker's got an app that runs on Mac and Windows now. So if you go to beta.docker.com, you can sign up for it. And basically it runs Hyper-V with a Linux VM in it. And that's your host then for your Docker images.
So is the base image a Linux image or Windows image?
Yeah, running on so it's basically a Linux VM running in Hyper-V or in VirtualBox in the
So-
case of Docker
So in
machine.
theory that we don't have any kind of Windows Server image, right?
On Windows Server 2016, CTP 4 upwards, they've got that.
Yeah.
So that means that Windows Server will support Docker.
Uh-huh.
So that's the only version of Windows that will support Docker?
At this point. I would expect that will roll into Windows 10 desktop at some point, given it's the same, one Windows nowadays. But I don't want to say, on behalf of Microsoft, here's their timing and their roadmap. 'Cause they don't even know themselves, I'm pretty sure. Is that recorded?
This stuff's pretty live. Every couple of months there's a substantial release of something. Like there was
Yeah.
February, then May, So it's live. They're really pushing it.
The Windows Server one's interesting because it'll probably end up being a nano server image that gets released as the base image versus a server core. So the server core image is about 9.6 gig. A Linux image is about anywhere between 400 and 800 meg sort of thing. The ramp up time for a Windows Server core, quite long compared to a nano server, which is about 400 meg. And if you're talking containers, you want the smallest possible thing, so that because you're running lots of these, it's effectively multiple processors on the host. So you want to have lots of small images. So I don't think Windows Server Core as a base image will be the most popular one in the world. You just don't need half that stuff. So we'll see what happens over time with that. Stay tuned, as they say. Yeah.
Does this mean we're actually going to start seeing .NET running on top of Linux?
That's it.
Yeah,
That was it.